Welcome back. It's been a little more than a week since Air France Flight 447 from Rio de Janeiro to Paris crashed in the Atlantic Ocean, bringing a horrific end to the lives of the 228 people aboard. Search crews from Brazil and France have been desperately hunting for clues as to what may have caused the plane to go down, but have so far been unsuccessful. They have been able to recover 28 bodies from the waters, as well as several items from the flight, including the tail fin belonging to the jet. Now, suspicion of what caused the crash has come to focus, at least in part, on the Airbus's speed sensors. Air France has said it's stepping up replacement of the sensors on its A330s amid speculation that they may have iced up during a storm at high altitude and supplied false airspeed data to the cockpit. Well, joining us right now for more on this story is Pierre Duval, who's the president of the Air and Safety Commission at France's Aero Club. Thank you very much for being our guest tonight. First off, tell me, how feasible is it that these airspeed sensors could have caused this plane to crash?
The airspeed sensors by themselves cannot cause any kind of crash. The thing is that these airspeed sensors give to the captain an indication about the speed by itself, because at this altitude you have absolutely no clue about the speed, because the air around you is just without any indication. So you have to rely on the speed in order to know exactly, on the speed indicator, in order to know exactly if you are far from what is called the stall speed, or the never exceed speed, which is the maximum speed for which the airplane was designed.
All right. There have been conflicting clues as to what may have caused this plane to crash. Last week, Brazil's defense minister said that he ruled out a mid-air explosion. Yet a Spanish pilot also said that while he was flying that same zone at the time of this accident, he saw a flash of light in the air. Who do you believe among those two theories? Who do you believe? And, you know, can we ever know what happened to this plane?
Yeah, we'll be able to know if they find what they call the black boxes. But 3 days ago, we were with the French defense minister, and he never ruled out the fact that there could be an explosion and a mid-air explosion. So this is not something to be discarded without any further indication. Everybody is now focusing on these probes because everybody knows that there have been some issues regarding the indications, and now everybody knows that without this speed indication, the captain is not able to fly the aircraft in the thunderstorm.
Let me ask you one question. Can the bodies recovered, can they show any clues? Can they have any clues as to what may have happened? If an autopsy on these bodies is performed, can there be any explanation maybe as to what happened?
I assume that if there has been any kind of explosion inside the plane, somebody which would be close to the explosion place could give some clues about the nature of the explosive and the fact that there was an explosion. So there's a chance, if there was a mid-air explosion, that somebody or some parts of the aircraft have some remains of the kind of explosive which could have been used.
All right. Thank you very much, Pierre Duval. Thank you very much for your analysis. Now, as the Air France mystery unravels, let's take a look back at how events unfolded in the past week in this air tragedy with so many questions and yet so few answers.
The Rio-Paris flight was due to arrive at 11:15 a.m., but during the night of Sunday to Monday, the plane, an Airbus A330, suddenly disappeared from radar screens, somewhere off the coast of Brazil. On board, 228 people. In Rio Galeão and Paris Charles de Gaulle airports, authorities quickly set up psychological assistance centers for families.
She lost her daughter. She took this plane to go on holiday.
When the signal was lost, the plane was flying at a speed of 840 kilometers an hour, with an altitude of more than 1,100 meters, figures which foreshadowed a grim outcome. A few hours after the tragedy was reported, French President Nicolas Sarkozy was at Charles de Gaulle Airport.
We don't have any of the details of what happened. It's a disaster that Air France has never seen the like of.
It was 3 minutes past 7 p.m. in Rio when the Airbus took off. 4 hours later, the pilot announced a zone of turbulence. Between 11:10 p.m. and 11:14 p.m., the aircraft transmitted a quantity of automated electronic messages. 11:10 p.m., the autopilot was disengaged. 2 minutes later, a warning message indicated there was a conflict between the independent air data systems, supposed to provide essential information for the pilot, altitude, airspeed, and orientation of the aircraft. 11:13 p.m., the main computer stopped functioning. The last message came 1 minute later. The signal was lost 650 kilometers off the coast of the Fernando de Noronha archipelago. It's on these islands that the Brazilian army based its advanced headquarters for the recovery mission. France sent in teams from Senegal. As the victims' families, friends, and colleagues began to grieve, French and Brazilian armies meticulously patrolled the presumed crash area. Nothing for 4 days, but then a turn of events. The Brazilian army claimed it had identified part of the jet's baggage hold. Mistake. It was only a large piece of wood.
Sadly, this is a reality we have to deal with. The ocean is full of debris which can easily be mistaken with the things we're looking for.
False Alert 2, this oil trail spotted off the coast of Fernando de Noronha. It wasn't kerosene from the missing flight, but rather sea cargo pollution. Now, 5 days after the tragedy, the recovery operation had to start all over again, and when it came to the investigation, there were still no tangible elements to explain why the Airbus had crashed. The idea that the aircraft was brought down by a lightning strike was quickly ruled out. The French daily newspaper Le Monde introduced the theory of the plane exploding in midair after a Spanish pilot claimed he witnessed a bright white light in the supposed crash area. But Saturday came with important discoveries which helped put a stop to the avalanche of speculation. Bodies and pieces of the wreckage had been recovered.
There are now no doubts whatsoever that all the objects we have found come from the Air France Airbus. It is certain that the bodies are those of the passengers.
For the moment, 28 bodies have been recovered. 16 are now on the island of Fernando de Noronha. Police experts have arrived to identify them. In France, the governmental investigation agency BEA has confirmed the fact there was a problem with the Airbus 330's speed probes, a type of failure Air France had already encountered, but which to this moment does not solely explain why the plane crashed. Under the pressure of many of its pilots, Air France has now decided to replace these parts on its A330 fleet. A French nuclear submarine is to start the black box search mission in the area on Wednesday. Only by analyzing the data contained in the black box may we truly know what happened to Flight 447. Information which will perhaps help the victims' families in their painful grieving process.
Well, joining us right now, live from Sao Paulo in Brazil with the very latest on the search efforts is our correspondent, Mark Burley. Mark, thanks for being with us. First off, I mean, this must have been such a terrible week for these families.
Well, indeed, there were 59 Brazilians on the flight, and this was very much a shock in Brazil. It's been the last couple of years, there's been a couple of major air disasters. This is the latest, and the Brazilians are very keen to get some answers to all this.
Now, as far as the search efforts go, Mark, the main information again today is, of course, the recovery of these bodies from the sea. I imagine that authorities are hoping that they can provide clues as to what may have happened to this Air France flight.
Well, the Brazilian authorities are telling us that it's very much two operations that are happening right now. The operation that the Brazilians are mounting with French Navy help is to recover bodies and debris. Of course, they're looking at the debris and the bodies to see if there are any clues. But the separate operation is an operation that's being mounted by the French to find the black boxes. And as you mentioned in the story just shown there, that's where the real keys to this mystery are.
And have search teams been able to narrow down a location for these black boxes, Mark?
Well, we don't know that for sure, but the fact that they found the tail fin of the plane yesterday suggests that they might be able to narrow the area. You have to remember that right at the beginning, there was some doubt that they were even going to find bodies. The defense minister mentioned that this area is full of sharks. There was some pessimism that they might find any pieces of the plane when it wasn't known what might have brought it down. now that they've found the tail fin, there's some hope that they might find the black boxes, because the tail section of the aircraft is where the black boxes are mounted. Now, they haven't found the section itself, but the tail fin should narrow it down for this French submarine that's arriving tomorrow to try and detect the homing beacons. After that, there's a couple of French subs that will be arriving in the area on Thursday, and if the French military submarine can detect the signals, then these research submarines will be able to dive down and recover these.
And I imagine that autopsies are going to be performed on the bodies found, Mark. I mean, aren't the Brazilian authorities hoping that the autopsies maybe can reveal some clues about this crash?
Well, certainly, as the gentleman in your studio mentioned, the bodies will be looked at in terms of any clues, if there's any sort of flash burn or anything that might indicate an explosion or a fuel tank fire. At the moment, we don't have any indication. The Brazilians are being very close-lipped about the information they have about the bodies. They're not even releasing the genders of the bodies anymore. But they will be looked at very closely. And we're hoping in the next few days to get some more information on that.
All right, Mark Burley in Sao Paulo, thank you very much for updating us on the latest there in the search efforts for Air France Flight 447, which went down last week, carrying 228 people on board. More news coming up very shortly on France 24. I hope you do stay with us.